Preface: when power is no longer restrained. In Greek mythology, Zeus is revered as the supreme ruler of the cosmos, the embodiment of order, justice, and divine authority. His thunderbolts are said to maintain balance between heaven and earth, while his throne on Mount Olympus symbolizes stability that no force can shake. To mortals and gods alike, Zeus appears as an unchallengeable figure, a guarantor of cosmic law and eternal hierarchy. Yet behind the blinding flashes of lightning and the illusion of absolute control lies a far more fragile truth. Power, when left unchecked, does not merely corrupt, it blinds. The legend of Zeus is not only a tale of triumph over titans and monsters, but also a quiet warning hidden beneath layers of reverence and fear. For even the king of the gods is not immune to arrogance, desire, and doubt. There were moments, whispered only in forgotten prophecies and forbidden myths, when Zeus stood dangerously close to becoming the very chaos he once defeated. His decisions, driven by pride and insecurity, slowly eroded the foundations of Olympus. Trust among the gods weakened, alliances fractured, and justice became indistinguishable from tyranny. What was once divine order began to resemble enforced obedience. This preface invites the reader to look beyond the glorified image of Zeus and confront a darker possibility, that the greatest threat to the divine realm did not come from titans, giants, or mortals, but from the unchecked will of its own ruler. When power is no longer restrained by wisdom or self-awareness, even a god can become a catalyst for collapse. Part 1. The fatal error of arrogance, when Zeus believed he could never be overthrown. The first and most catastrophic mistake Zeus ever made was not an act of violence, betrayal, or cruelty, but a belief, the belief that his rule was eternal. After the fall of the Titans and the shattering of the old cosmic order, Zeus ascended the throne of Olympus not merely as a victor, but as a symbol of a new age. To gods and mortals alike, his reign appeared absolute. The sky obeyed him, lightning answered his call, and even fate itself seemed to bend beneath his authority. In this triumph, arrogance quietly took root. Zeus had overthrown Cronus, a tyrant who devoured his own children out of fear of prophecy. In doing so, Zeus believed he had broken the cycle of violent succession that plagued the divine realm. He saw himself as different, wiser, more just. Yet this very distinction became the foundation of his hubris. Zeus did not merely rule Olympus. He believed he had transcended the laws that governed all rulers before him. Power, in his eyes, was no longer something to be guarded or questioned, but something that inherently belonged to him. In the early years of his reign, Zeus often spoke of balance and justice. He positioned himself as the guardian of order, the final barrier between chaos and creation. But gradually, his victories hardened into entitlement. Every challenge to his authority, no matter how small, felt not like disagreement, but like heresy. Zeus began to equate opposition with betrayal and obedience with righteousness. The idea that Olympus could exist without him became unthinkable, not only to others, but to Zeus himself. Ancient myths hint at forgotten councils of gods, gatherings where Zeus no longer listened but declared. Once, Olympus had been a realm of debate, where Athena's wisdom, Apollo's foresight, and Themis's law-shaped decisions alongside Zeus's strength. Over time, these voices were diminished. Zeus still allowed counsel, but only when it confirmed his own judgment. When it did not, he dismissed it as weakness, hesitation, or disloyalty. Arrogance does not arrive as madness. It arrives as certainty. The irony is that Zeus's fear of being overthrown mirrored that of his father, Cronus, more closely than he ever admitted. Though Zeus outwardly condemned Cronus's paranoia, inwardly he shared the same terror, the fear that power is temporary. But instead of confronting this fear, Zeus buried it beneath dominance. Every assertion of control, every display of overwhelming force, was not merely a show of strength, but a denial of vulnerability. By convincing himself that he could never fall, Zeus avoided the one truth that could have saved him, that all power demands restraint. Prophecies played a crucial role in feeding Zeus's arrogance. Unlike mortals, Zeus believed he could outmaneuver fate. When oracles spoke of threats to Olympus, Zeus interpreted them not as warnings, but as challenges to be crushed. In several lesser-known myths, Zeus actively manipulated outcomes to prove the prophecies wrong, only to fulfill them in unintended ways. Each time disaster was narrowly avoided, Zeus's confidence grew. Survival became validation. He mistook endurance for invincibility. This belief reshaped his relationships with the other gods. Hera, once his equal in governance, became marginalized, her authority overshadowed by Zeus's unilateral decisions. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, began to sense that intelligence was no longer valued unless it served power. Even Apollo, the god of prophecy, found his visions selectively accepted, honored only when they aligned with Zeus's will. Olympus was no longer a divine family, but a hierarchy centered entirely around one figure. Zeus's arrogance also manifested in how he handled dissent. Rather than addressing the causes of unrest, he punished its expression. Gods who questioned his judgments were exiled, silenced, or stripped of influence. In fictional extensions of the myth, there are tales of minor deities erased from memory itself, their names forbidden to be spoken on Olympus. Zeus believed that by eliminating opposition, he was preserving order. In reality, he was breeding resentment in the shadows. The most dangerous aspect of Zeus's arrogance was his assumption that gratitude would replace loyalty. He believed that because he had saved the gods from the Titans, they owed him eternal allegiance. But gratitude fades, especially when paired with fear. The gods began to obey not out of respect, but out of necessity. An obedience born from fear is fragile. It endures only until fear finds a stronger rival. Meanwhile, Zeus's isolation deepened. Surrounded by gods who bowed, but no longer spoke freely, Zeus mistook silence for harmony. He interpreted the absence of rebellion as proof of stability. Yet Olympus was growing quiet in a way that precedes catastrophe. The laughter of the gods faded, replaced by careful words and guarded expressions. Zeus, blinded by his certainty, failed to notice that he was ruling over a realm that no longer trusted him. There exists a forbidden myth of a mirror forged by Hephaestus at Zeus's command. This mirror was said to show Zeus not as others saw him, but as he truly was. When Zeus gazed into it, he did not see a tyrant or monster. He saw a god alone, clutching power as if it were a lifeline. Enraged by this reflection, Zeus shattered the mirror, declaring it flawed. The fragments were scattered across the cosmos, each one carrying a warning that Zeus refused to hear. Arrogance ultimately distorted Zeus's understanding of justice. Punishments became excessive, mercy became rare, and law became whatever reinforced his authority. Zeus still spoke the language of order, but his actions increasingly contradicted it. The gods began to whisper that Olympus was no longer governed by justice, but by the will of one who feared losing control more than losing righteousness. What Zeus failed to understand is that overthrow does not always come in the form of open rebellion. Sometimes it begins as withdrawal. Faith erodes. Trust decays. Alliances weaken. By the time resistance becomes visible, the foundation has already crumbled. Zeus's arrogance did not summon an enemy to Olympus. It hollowed Olympus from within. This fatal error set the stage for everything that followed. It created the conditions for betrayal, rebellion, and cosmic instability. Zeus believed that by asserting dominance, he was protecting the divine order. In truth, he was repeating the very mistake he once rose to destroy. Like Cronus before him, Zeus allowed fear and pride to guide his rule, proving that even gods are not immune to the cycles they believe they have escaped. Thus, the first crack in the pillars of Olympus was not struck by lightning or war, but by certainty. When Zeus believed he could never be overthrown, he stopped being a guardian of order and became its greatest liability. And from that moment on, the fall of the gods was no longer a question of if, but when. Part 2. The Error of Desire, when Zeus created his own enemies. If arrogance weakened the foundations of Olympus, desire set it on fire. Zeus's second and most corrosive mistake was not one of governance or prophecy, but of impulse. Desire, unchecked and justified by power, became a force more destructive than any titan or primordial monster. Through his own appetites, Zeus did not merely fracture divine trust. He unknowingly forged the very enemies who would one day threaten the throne of Olympus. In myth, Zeus is infamous for his countless affairs, disguises, and seductions. These stories are often told lightly, even humorously, as proof of his vitality and dominance. Yet when examined closely, they reveal a darker pattern, a ruler who believed that his status placed him beyond consequence. Zeus did not see desire as weakness. He saw it as entitlement. To him, the world existed not only to be ruled, but to be taken. Each union Zeus formed outside his marriage to Hera carried consequences that reached far beyond personal betrayal. His lovers were transformed, abandoned, cursed, or silenced. His children, born of divine lust, were elevated and discarded with equal indifference. Zeus convinced himself that these outcomes were necessary sacrifices for cosmic balance. In truth, they were the byproducts of a ruler who mistook indulgence for freedom. Hera's rage is often portrayed as jealousy, but in deeper interpretations, is political and existential. Zeus's infidelity undermined not only their marriage, but the legitimacy of divine order. Hera represented continuity, law, and sacred union. Every affair was a public declaration that even the king of the gods would not be bound by the laws he enforced upon others. Over time, Hera's resentment grew into something more dangerous than vengeance, distrust. And when the goddess of marriage loses faith in the ruler of heaven, the very concept of divine stability begins to erode. The true danger, however, lay not in Hera's wrath, but in Zeus's offspring. Heroes, demigods, and semi-divine beings filled the world, each carrying fragments of Zeus's power and contradictions. Some were nurtured, others neglected, many exploited. Zeus elevated certain children as champions of order, only to abandon them when their existence became inconvenient. In doing so, he created a generation that inherited not only divine strength, but divine resentment. In extended and fictionalized myths, there are tales of forgotten sons and daughters of Zeus who were denied recognition, stripped of protection, and left to suffer under mortal cruelty or divine punishment. These beings grew powerful in isolation, shaped by rejection. They learned early that the king of the gods was not a protector, but a distant force who appeared only when it served his image. For them, Zeus was not a father. He was a symbol of hypocrisy. Desire also blurred Zeus's judgment. When driven by attraction, he ignored warnings, prophecies, and political consequences. There were unions that should never have occurred, alliances that destabilized realms, and promises made in passion that could not be undone. Zeus believed he could always correct the aftermath with strength. He underestimated the endurance of emotional wounds. One of the most dangerous illusions Zeus held was that love could be abandoned without consequence. Mortals might forget, die, or fade into myth. Gods, however, remember. Nymphs cursed by Hera, goddesses humiliated by secrecy, and queens destroyed by scandal became silent witnesses to Zeus's recklessness. Each carried a story that contradicted the narrative of Zeus as a just ruler. Stories spread quietly, eroding reverence where fear could not reach. Even Olympus itself became divided by Zeus's desires. Some gods benefited from his favoritism, others suffered from his neglect. Athena, born of Zeus alone, was exalted as wisdom incarnate, while other children were cast aside. Apollo and Artemis were protected, yet constantly reminded of their conditional worth. This selective affection taught the gods a dangerous lesson. Closeness to Zeus was not based on merit or justice, but proximity to his desires. In fictional expansions of the myth, there is a secret belief among the gods that Zeus's greatest fear was not rebellion, but irrelevance. Desire became his way of asserting existence. By conquering hearts, bodies, and bloodlines, Zeus reaffirmed his presence in every corner of the world. But this conquest came at a cost. The more Zeus spread himself across the cosmos, the more fragmented his authority became. The enemies born of desire did not rise immediately. They waited. They observed. Some sought revenge, others justice, others simply recognition. Zeus dismissed them all as minor threats, assuming that gratitude or fear would keep them loyal. He failed to understand that beings born of abandonment do not seek power for its own sake. They seek meaning. And meaning, once denied, becomes a weapon. There are who call legends of a hidden conclave, formed not by titans or gods, but by the unwanted descendants of Zeus. They did not seek to destroy Olympus outright. They sought to expose it. Their goal was not war, but revelation, to show the cosmos that the ruler of heaven was ruled by impulse, not principle. Whether or not such a conclave ever existed matters less than what it represents. Zeus's desire planted the idea that his authority was morally hollow. Desire also weakened Zeus's relationship with fate. In attempting to escape consequences, he manipulated outcomes, altered memories, and erased truths. Each alteration strained the fabric of destiny. The fates themselves, bound to neutrality, began to weave threads that reflected imbalance. Zeus believed fate served him. He did not realize that fate records everything, even what is hidden. Perhaps the cruelest irony of Zeus's error is that he longed to be loved, yet acted in ways that made genuine love impossible. Fear replaced devotion. Admiration replaced trust. When Zeus looked upon Olympus and saw obedience, he mistook it for loyalty. When he saw silence, he mistook it for peace. In reality, desire had turned the divine realm into a stage where everyone played a role to survive. By creating enemies through neglect, humiliation, and broken promises, Zeus ensured that any future challenge to his rule would be deeply personal. These enemies did not seek the throne because they lusted for power. They sought it because Zeus had taught them that power was the only language he understood. Thus, the error of desire became inseparable from the error of arrogance. Zeus believed himself irresistible and irreplaceable. He failed to see that every indulgence carved another fracture into Olympus. Every abandoned lover, every forgotten child, every broken oath added weight to a future collapse. In the end, Zeus did not create his enemies by cruelty alone, but by carelessness. Desire convinced him that consequences were temporary, that forgiveness was inevitable, and that authority could survive contradiction. But the divine realm remembers, and when reckoning comes, it is often delivered not by strangers, but by those who were once closest. The second great mistake of Zeus was not that he desired too much, but that he never accepted responsibility for what his desires created. And in doing so, he transformed love into resentment, legacy into threat, and his own blood into the sharpest blade aimed at Olympus itself. Part 3. The Error of Fear, when Zeus lost himself. If arrogance convinced Zeus that he was untouchable, and desire persuaded him that consequences could always be undone, then fear was the force that finally stripped him of his true identity. The third and most devastating mistake Zeus made was not visible at first. It did not arrive with thunder or rebellion, but as a quiet, persistent presence in his mind. The fear of replacement. The fear of prophecy. The fear that one day he would become what he once destroyed. Zeus had risen to power by overthrowing Cronus, a ruler consumed by terror of his own children. That victory defined Zeus's self-image. He was the liberator, the breaker of cycles, the god who ended tyranny. Yet, buried beneath that identity was a haunting realization. Cronus had once believed himself invincible too. The thought unsettled Zeus, and from that unease, fear began to grow. Unlike arrogance or desire, fear does not announce itself openly. It disguises itself as caution, vigilance, and responsibility. Zeus told himself that his growing severity was necessary. The world was dangerous. Olympus was fragile. Order had to be enforced. But the more Zeus acted in the name of protection, the more he resembled a ruler guarding power rather than justice. Prophecies became Zeus's obsession. Every oracle, every whisper from the fates, every ambiguous vision was interpreted as a potential threat. Zeus no longer sought understanding. He sought control. Instead of asking what a prophecy meant, he asked how it could be neutralized. In doing so, he transformed fate from a guide into an enemy. In some who caught traditions, Zeus secretly imprisoned seers whose visions troubled him, erasing their names from divine records. In others, entire timelines were altered through divine intervention, causing ripples across reality. Zeus justified these acts as necessary evils. Yet each manipulation weakened the natural order he claimed to defend. Fate does not resist control loudly. It bends, waits, and remembers. Fear also altered Zeus's perception of loyalty. Where once he saw allies, he now saw potential rivals. Where once he valued wisdom, he now suspected ambition. Athena's intelligence, Apollo's foresight, even Hera's authority became sources of anxiety rather than strength. Zeus began to isolate himself, surrounding his throne not with equals, but with silence. This isolation marked a critical turning point. Olympus ceased to be a council and became a court. Decisions were no longer shaped through dialogue, but delivered as decrees. Zeus believed that unity required unquestioned obedience. In truth, he was severing the very bonds that had stabilized his rule. Fear convinced him that shared power was weakness, not resilience. Perhaps the most tragic consequence of Zeus's fear was how it reshaped his sense of self. He no longer ruled as the god who freed the cosmos from oppression, but as a guardian of his own legacy. Every action became reactive. Every punishment became preemptive. Zeus struck not because a crime had been committed, but because one might be. In extended myths, there are stories of Zeus contemplating the destruction of entire civilizations based solely on prophetic possibility. Mortals were no longer individuals under divine protection, but variables in a cosmic equation. This detachment eroded Zeus's empathy. He still spoke of justice, but justice without compassion is merely authority wearing a mask. Fear also deepened Zeus's reliance on spectacle. Lightning became not just a weapon, but a message. Displays of overwhelming power were meant to deter rebellion, yet they achieved the opposite. The gods learned that Zeus no longer trusted reason. Mortals learned that mercy was unpredictable. Fear spread outward from Zeus, poisoning the very reverence he depended upon. At the heart of this transformation was a profound contradiction. Zeus feared becoming Cronus, yet every fearful action brought him closer to that fate. Like his father, Zeus attempted to outrun prophecy through domination. Like his father, he believed that eliminating threats would secure eternity. And like his father, he failed to understand that fear accelerates the very outcomes it seeks to prevent. In fictional expansions, there's a legend of a moment when Zeus stood alone on Olympus during a rare silence of thunder. No prayers were spoken. No God se approached. In that stillness, Zeus realized that he was obeyed but not followed, feared but not trusted. This realization did not bring clarity. It brought panic, and panic hardened into resolve. Zeus's final loss was not his throne, but his identity. He could no longer distinguish between the ruler he needed to be and the tyrant he feared becoming. Every choice felt justified because it was made in defense of order. Yet order without balance collapses inward. Olympus did not fall because Zeus was overthrown, but because it ceased to reflect the values it claimed to uphold. Fear also distorted Zeus's relationship with time. Instead of building a future, he obsessed over preserving the present. Progress became a threat. Change became rebellion. Zeus believed that stability meant stasis, forgetting that the cosmos itself is defined by motion. By resisting transformation, he positioned himself against the very nature of existence. The gods sensed this imbalance. Some withdrew. Others conspired quietly, not out of hatred, but necessity. A ruler ruled by fear cannot guide a world that thrives on harmony. Zeus's tragedy lies in the fact that he still believed himself righteous. He never saw himself as a villain. He saw himself as the last line of defense against chaos. And that is the most dangerous kind of ruler. When Zeus lost himself to fear, he did not become weak. He became rigid, unyielding, unable to listen, unable to change. Olympus, once a living system of divine forces, became an extension of one god's anxiety. The thunder still roared, but it no longer carried meaning. Power remained, but wisdom faded. In the end, the error of fear completed what arrogance began and desire complicated. Zeus did not need to be defeated by an external enemy. He dismantled the foundations of his own rule by surrendering his humanity, the very quality that once made him a better ruler than those before him. Thus, when the legends speak of Olympus standing on the edge of collapse, they do not describe a war or a catastrophe. They describe a god who forgot who he was. And when Zeus lost himself, the divine order lost its anchor. Fear did not steal Zeus's throne. It stole his soul. Conclusion: Zeus, the eternal lesson of power. The story of Zeus, when stripped of reverence and mythic grandeur, becomes more than a tale of gods and thunder. It transforms into a timeless lesson about power itself. Zeus did not nearly bring the divine realm to ruin because he was weak, but because he was unchecked. His fall was not the result of a single enemy or a single catastrophic moment, but the slow accumulation of arrogance, desire, and fear left unexamined. Arrogance convinced Zeus that he stood above all limits. Desire persuaded him that consequences were temporary and forgiveness inevitable. Fear, finally, hollowed him out, turning a ruler of balance into a guardian of his own insecurity. Together, these flaws reveal a truth that transcends mythology. Power without self-restraint inevitably turns inward and begins to consume its bearer. Zeus remains the king of the gods, yet his legacy is deeply conflicted. He is both protector and threat, lawgiver and violator of law. Through him, myth delivers a quiet but devastating warning. The greatest danger to any system of order does not always come from rebellion or chaos, but from those entrusted to defend it. The lesson of Zeus endures because it mirrors every age and every throne. Authority that refuses reflection becomes tyranny. Strength that rejects humility becomes fear. And leadership that forgets its limits plants the seeds of its own undoing. In the end, Zeus stands not only as a god of thunder, but as a reminder etched into myth itself. Even the one who commands the storm can become the storm that destroys everything, if he forgets where his power must end. Prelude: the lightning of power and desire. At the summit of Mount Olympus, where clouds bow and thunder kneels, one name reigns above all others: Zeus. To mortals, he is the architect of order, the guardian of cosmic law, the hand that strikes down chaos with divine lightning. Yet behind every brilliant flash of thunder lies a darker echo, a whisper of longing, temptation, and unrestrained desire. Zeus is not merely a god of the sky. He is a god of wanting. His power stretches across heaven and earth, but his heart is restless, always searching for the next forbidden flame. Each storm he unleashes seems to mirror an inner turmoil, as if the sky itself trembles under the weight of his passions. Legends speak of Zeus descending from Olympus in countless forms: a golden rain, a gentle swan, a wandering stranger, all disguises worn in pursuit of love that was never meant to be his. In those moments, divine authority becomes seduction, and supreme power transforms into temptation. Thus, Zeus stands as both ruler and prisoner, the master of all creation, yet enslaved by his own desires. His lightning does not only illuminate the sky, It reveals the eternal conflict between power and passion burning within the king of the gods. Part 1. Zeus, the supreme god and the hunger for power. The birth of a tyrant slayer. Before Zeus was the ruler of Olympus, before thunder answered to his will, he was a hunted child. Cronus, king of the Titans, had learned of a prophecy. One of his own children would overthrow him. In fear, he devoured each newborn as soon as it left Rhea's womb. Gods who would have ruled the cosmos were swallowed into darkness, trapped in their father's living prison. Zeus alone escaped. Rhea hid the infant in a cave on Crete and tricked Cronus into swallowing a stone instead. There, nurtured by nymphs and guarded by the Curetes who clashed their shields to drown out his cries, Zeus grew not just in strength, but in resentment. He learned early that power is the only shield against annihilation. This childhood shaped him forever. Zeus did not grow up learning love. He grew up learning survival. And survival, for a god destined to rule, meant one thing: dominance, overthrowing the old world. When Zeus reached maturity, he did not return to his father seeking peace. He returned with poison and vengeance. With the help of Métis, Zeus forced Cronus to vomit up his swallowed children: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, resurrecting a generation of gods who had never known freedom. Together, they waged a war that tore the universe apart, the Titanomachy. For 10 years, Titans and Olympians clashed. Mountains were hurled like weapons. Oceans boiled. The sky cracked open. And Zeus stood at the center of it all. It was Zeus who freed the Cyclopes and the Cinemanes, monstrous beings imprisoned by Cronus. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged Zeus his greatest weapon, the Thunderbolt, a divine force capable of splitting worlds. With it, Zeus did not merely defeat the Titans. He erased them. Cronus was cast into Tartarus, locked away in eternal darkness. The old order was destroyed, and Zeus emerged not just as a victor, but as the sole undisputed authority of the cosmos. Yet even in triumph, something dangerous was born. A god who learns that violence brings order may never stop using violence to maintain it. The crown of Olympus. After the war, Zeus divided the universe with his brothers. Poseidon received the seas. Hades took the underworld. Zeus claimed the sky, and with it dominion over all. From Mount Olympus, Zeus ruled not merely as a king, but as a living embodiment of law. Oaths were sworn in his name. Justice flowed from his judgment. Even the other gods trembled at his thunder. But power gained through conquest is never fully secure. Zeus understood this. His reign was haunted by the same fear that had consumed Cronus, the fear of being overthrown. He had destroyed a tyrant, yet he knew in his bones how easily a ruler could become one. So Zeus did what insecure rulers always do. He sought total control, not only over the heavens, but over fate, loyalty, and even desire, power and possession. To Zeus, love was never separate from power. Every goddess he seduced, every mortal woman he touched, was not merely an object of affection. She was a symbol of conquest. Each affair expanded his influence, creating bloodlines tied directly to him, spreading his essence across the world. In a sense, Zeus was building an empire of flesh and blood. Heroes like Heracles, Perseus, and Minos were not accidents. They were living monuments to Zeus's reach, proof that no kingdom, no lineage, no womb was beyond his grasp. This was not romance. This was imperialism, the psychology of a god who must own everything. Why did Zeus need so many lovers? The myths offer a chilling answer. Because he could. A being who controls lightning, fate, and law exists beyond refusal. When Zeus desired, the world bent. Yet beneath this arrogance lay a deeper terror. Zeus was afraid of losing control. He remembered the darkness of Cronus's belly. He remembered helplessness. So he compensated with excess. If everything belonged to him, land, sky, gods, women, then he would never again be powerless. Thus, his lust was not weakness. It was strategy, the illusion of divine right. Olympus worshipped Zeus as a protector. But protection and domination are easily confused. Zeus punished those who defied him. Zeus rewarded those who pleased him. Zeus decided what was just, and justice always favored Zeus. Over time, law became indistinguishable from his will. And that is the most dangerous form of power. When authority believes it is morality. The storm within. The sky above Olympus is never truly calm. Clouds gather. Thunder rolls. Lightning flashes. In ancient stories, and in the darker legends whispered by nymphs and forgotten goddesses, the storms were said to mirror Zeus's inner state. Each affair, each betrayal of Hera, each stolen moment of pleasure stirred the heavens. Zeus was not at peace. He ruled everything, yet mastered nothing inside himself. The seed of corruption. Thus, the tragedy of Zeus begins not with lust, but with fear. Fear of being overthrown. Fear of being unloved. Fear of being powerless. And so he chose to be everything else. Supreme. Feared. Desired. Even if it meant turning the world into his personal domain. Conclusion of Part 1. Zeus did not become the ruler of gods because he was the most just. He became ruler because he was the most relentless. And once he had everything, he could not stop wanting more. For a god who once knew helplessness, power was never enough. It had to be absolute. Part 2. The hidden affairs and the wounds they left behind. Whispers beneath Olympus. Olympus was built of marble and gold, but its foundations were laid upon secrets. For every hymn sung to Zeus, there was a woman somewhere crying his name in silence. For every statue raised in his honor, there was a life quietly shattered by his touch. The gods called him father. The poets called him king. But many women, mortal and divine, knew him by another name. The storm that passed through their lives and never stayed. His affairs were never meant to be seen. They existed in shadows, hidden behind clouds, behind divine disguises, behind fear. And yet, their consequences were impossible to hide. The art of divine deception. Zeus did not seduce as mortals do. He conquered through illusion. When he desired someone, he rarely appeared as himself. Instead, he became what she trusted. To Leda, he was a wounded swan. To Danae, he was golden rain. To Europa, a gentle white bull. To Alcmene, the very image of her husband. These were not romantic gestures. They were acts of manipulation. By wearing forms that disarmed, Zeus removed the possibility of refusal. How could a woman reject a helpless creature, a sacred sign, a loving spouse? This was seduction without consent, divine power dressed as affection. Io, the girl who became a prisoner. Io was a priestess of Hera, sworn to purity. Zeus saw her, and desire struck him like lightning. To hide his affair, Zeus wrapped the world in clouds and took her. When Hera grew suspicious, Zeus transformed Io into a white heifer. He did not free her. He hid her. Io wandered the earth in animal form, hunted by Hera's jealousy, tormented by a gadfly sent to drive her mad. She crossed oceans, deserts, and mountains, unable to speak, unable to beg for mercy. Zeus watched, the king of gods, who could command heaven itself. Let the girl he claimed to love suffer for years. Love, when mixed with cowardice, becomes cruelty. Semele, the woman who died for wanting the truth. Semele was a mortal princess who loved Zeus without knowing his true nature. Hera, cruel and clever, whispered doubt into her heart. If he truly loves you, ask him to show himself. Bound by a divine oath, Zeus could not refuse. When he appeared in his full, godly form, blazing, radiant, terrible, Semele was consumed by fire. She died not because Zeus hated her. She died because Zeus loved himself more. Leda and the swan. Leda never knew she was being hunted by a god. She thought she was saving a frightened creature. Zeus chose the shape of a swan because it symbolized innocence. He wrapped his divinity in feathers and fragility. From that night came Helen, whose beauty would one day ignite the Trojan War. A single act of Zeus's desire would cost thousands of lives. The forgotten mothers. For every famous child of Zeus, there was a forgotten mother. Women who raised divine sons alone. Women who were blamed, exiled, or destroyed. Women whose only crime was being seen. The myths remember Heracles. They forget Alcmene's tears. Hera, queen of betrayal. Hera is often painted as cruel, but she was also a woman repeatedly humiliated by a husband who could not be faithful. Zeus did not just betray Hera, he made a spectacle of it. And so Hera struck back, not at Zeus, but at his lovers and their children. A tragic cycle of victim punishing victim, while the true offender remained untouchable. The empire of illegitimate gods. Zeus's children were everywhere. Kings, heroes, monsters, warriors. Each one was a reminder that Zeus had been there. Olympus became less a family and more a web of unresolved trauma. Conclusion of Part 2. Zeus did not simply love too much. He left too much behind. Broken women, fatherless children, a sky heavy with unspoken grief. And Olympus, for all its splendor, was built upon the tears of those who were never allowed to say no. Part 3. Womanizer or abuser of divine power. The question Olympus never dared to ask. In every myth about Zeus, there is one silence louder than all the thunder. No one ever asked whether the women had a choice. Poets spoke of seduction. Priests spoke of divine romance. Statues showed willing embraces. But in the shadows of Olympus, another truth lingered. How does one refuse a god? When a being controls storms, fate, and punishment itself, consent becomes a fragile illusion. Zeus did not need to threaten. His power was threat enough. The power imbalance of the divine. A mortal woman lived in a world where gods decided harvests, plagues, births, and deaths. If Zeus desired her, what were her options? Say yes, and be marked forever. Say no, and risk divine wrath. Even if Zeus never spoke a threat, the imbalance was absolute. That is not courtship. That is coercion wearing the mask of love. The language of myths. Ancient myths often describe Zeus's affairs using gentle words. He lay with her, he wooed her, he took her. But in the original Greek, many of these phrases also mean he seized. The language itself betrays the truth. These were not equal encounters. They were acts of domination. When desire becomes law, Zeus was not only the king of gods, he was the embodiment of justice. This meant that when Zeus wanted something, it was by definition justified. There was no higher court, no appeal, no divine restraining order. His desire became law, and that is the darkest form of tyranny. When lust disguises itself as righteousness. The victims without voices. Io, Olympus, Semele, Leda, Alcmene. The myths tell us what happened to them. They do not tell us how they felt. Their fear, their confusion, their grief. Those emotions were erased by centuries of storytelling that glorified Zeus and silenced everyone else. History was written by the thunderbolt. Hera's tragedy revisited. Hera is remembered as jealous. But imagine being eternally bound to a man who cannot stop betraying you. A man you cannot leave, cannot punish, cannot escape. Hera's cruelty was not born from malice. It was born from powerlessness. Zeus and the pattern of predators. Zeus's behavior followed a pattern. He noticed a woman. He desired her. He altered reality to reach her. He moved on. That is not romance. That is predation. Why Zeus was never stopped. No one could challenge him. Not the gods. Not the titans. Not fate itself. Power protected him. It always does. The modern mirror. We still tell stories about Zeus. We still romanticize powerful men who take what they want. The myths have not changed. Only the names have. Conclusion of Part 3. So is Zeus a womanizer? Or something far darker? When desire is backed by omnipotence, it ceases to be desire. It becomes a weapon. And Zeus, the king of gods, wielded it with devastating force. Conclusion. The supreme god or the symbol of endless desire. Zeus will forever stand as the ruler of Olympus, the god whose lightning shaped the heavens and whose will define the order of the cosmos. To the world, he is remembered as the champion who defeated the Titans and brought stability to a broken universe. Yet behind that towering image lies a far more unsettling truth. For Zeus did not only rule the skies. He ruled over hearts, bodies, and destinies. His countless lovers and secret affairs were not merely stories of passion, but reflections of a god who could never be satisfied. With unlimited power came unlimited entitlement, and with it, a hunger that no conquest could ever quiet. Every new romance was less about love and more about control, a reminder that even the king of gods could not escape his own cravings. In the end, Zeus remains a paradox, the ultimate guardian of order and the ultimate embodiment of chaos within. He created law, yet lived above it. He punished excess, yet indulged in it endlessly. Perhaps that is the true tragedy of Zeus, a god who ruled everything in existence, yet never learned how to rule himself.